Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call our meeting to order this evening. We're going to have a roll call by our city clerk, Kathy Valdez.
The record shall reflect that all members are present with the exception of Councilmember Green.
If you all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, it will be led by Councilmember Contreras this evening.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with the Brown Act, I'd like to announce that as a result of convening simultaneous meetings, the members of the Buenos Sanitation District will receive compensation of $147.75 for the district meeting pursuant to Buenos Sanitation District Ordinance 2006-1. I'd like to remind everyone that the Vista Municipal Code requires members of the public to observe order and decorum at the meeting and to conduct themselves in a courteous manner. The ordinance was adopted to allow for public input and to facilitate city business without disruption of the meeting. Applause is appropriate for items listed under the presentation portion of the agenda only. Students wishing to receive credit for attending this evening's meeting must stay for a minimum of 1 hour. However, we ask that you stay for the completion of an item rather than leaving in the middle of a discussion. When you're ready to leave, you can ask one of the sheriff deputies or a staff member in the back of the room to sign your paper. To speak on an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker slip with the number of the item you want to speak on and give it to the clerk's secretary staff. Speaker slips are available on the table just outside the city council chambers, and speakers will have 3 minutes to address the city council. So with that, we'll have the approval of our agenda by our city manager, Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. There are no changes this evening to the agenda.
Okay, we have 3 presentations this evening, and so I'd like to have my council join me down at the podium, down at the podium, but down below.
Start with 2. You want to take your money because you want to start with 2.
Yeah. Is Tasha here? Tasha Buena-Horvath, is she here yet? I don't see her, so I'll take hers after. So first, we're going to take this presentation with the Knights of Columbus annual Tootsie Roll Drive Days in Vista. I'd like to invite Sue Laubach and Downstown residents Kimberly Morris, Allison Hobbs, and Laura Hallett to come to this up here with us. Yes, they can all come. Whoever's with.
Come on down.
Come on down. I have a proclamation here that I'm going to read. Whereas the Knights of Columbus will hold their 35th annual Tootsie Roll Drive Days beginning October 21st through October 23rd, 2022, and whereas over 600 councils of the Knights of Columbus in California will conduct their annual candy drive in communities across the state to raise funds for intellectually disabled children and adults in California, and whereas all money collected locally will be donated to Downstown, a nonprofit organization with residential homes in North County for adults with developmental disabilities such as Down syndrome, and whereas intellectually disabled citizens are productive, contributing members of society, and funds raised through this candy drive will assist Downstown in supporting the continued independence of these citizens. And whereas the Vista City Council offers its sincere appreciation and support of all involved with this candy drive and commend them for their efforts to help others. So now, therefore, the mayor and members of the Vista City Council do hereby proclaim October 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, 2022 as Knights of Columbus Tootsie Roll Days in the city of Vista. So we urge all citizens to support this important fundraising activity to help the intellectually disabled children and adults in Vista and throughout California. So with that, congratulations, and we have some money for you, I think, tonight.
Yeah. So much. Would you like a Tootsie Roll? Thank you so much. Would you like a Tootsie Roll? Thank you so much.
I have extra dollars here for somebody.
Would you like a Tootsie?
I would love one. Thank you. Oh, you get it in there? Get in.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Would you like a Tootsie Roll? You can have it.
Anybody else want some?
I have one more here. I have one more dollar right here.
Do you want to go see people in the back?
And the way back over there.
Where?
Hey, let's go
Go
over
back,
there.
yeah, go back and.
Mayor, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thanks for coming.
Deputy
Look
Mayor,
who's here.
while you're down there, we have a speaker for right under the P4. Red ribbon neck. They gave it down there. They gave it to me to get it. It came all the way through the chain. Yeah. Well, for P4. Are we on P4 now?
Yeah, we're gonna go to the.
So she wants to speak before P4.
Got it. Well, you have to- Am I on? Okay. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead with our meeting. We have another proclamation. I'd like to invite Code Enforcement Manager Clarence Rich down. He's going to receive a proclamation declaring the second week of October 2022 as Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week in the City of Vista.
Thank you.
Is Estella coming here? Or she's not?
No, she's not.
Okay, I didn't think she was. Just checking. Okay, so I'm going to read that. I'm going to give this to you. Hold on. This to you.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to read this. Okay, so whereas code enforcement officers provide for the safety, health, and welfare of residents through the enforcement of local and state laws and ordinances dealing with various issues of building, zoning, housing, environmental, safety, and quality of life. And whereas code enforcement officers are dedicated, highly qualified, and trained professionals who diligently build cooperative partnerships with Vista residents and businesses to help improve the quality of life and maintain community standards in an equitable and impartial manner. And whereas the Vista code enforcement officers regularly coordinate with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, other city departments, and external agencies to effectively disseminate information and pursue complex cases that require diligence, patience, understanding, and education. And whereas code enforcement officers have a visible role in the city of Vista and regularly interact with the public in their capacity as officers and community liaisons. And whereas the mayor and members of the Vista City Council recognize our code enforcement officers who faithfully serve our community and acknowledge their critical role helping to improve the quality of life within our community. So now, therefore, be it resolved, the mayor and members of the Vista City Council hereby proclaim the second week of October 2022 as Code Enforcement Officer Appreciation Week in the city of Vista and encourage Vista residents to join in expressing their appreciation for the dedication and continued service of our code enforcement officers. So congratulations to you guys, and I know you work hard. You want a picture? You want? Okay,
Yeah.
here, it's yours.
On behalf of my staff and code enforcement team, I would like to accept this proclamation. Thank you very much.
you so much. Ghosting us, we're not gonna get shit.
Okay, we got one more here to do. Let's see. We have one more presentation here. Hold on. I'm shuffling paperwork here. And this one is a proclamation declaring October 23rd through 31st, 2022 as Red Ribbon Week in the city of Vista, and I'd like to invite David Oslachi, exalted ruler of the Vista Elks Lodge 1968, to come forward and accept our proclamation. So here's the proclamation. Oh, thank you, and be right here, and I'm going to read this proclamation. So, whereas alcohol and drug abuse affect individuals, families, and communities across the nation, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified efforts by community members be launched to prevent drug abuse, Red Ribbon Week offers citizens of Vista the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles. Red Ribbon Week is celebrated in communities across the nation on October 23rd through 31st. Whereas businesses, governments, law enforcement, media, healthcare providers, religious institutions, schools, and other community-based organizations will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing red ribbons and participating in drug prevention activities. And whereas there's hope in winning the war against drugs through prevention education in classrooms and determination of organizations such as the Vista Elks Lodge number 1968, who are a part of the largest volunteer drug awareness program in the United States. And whereas the week of October 23rd through the 31st has been designated National Red Ribbon Week, which encourages Americans to wear a red ribbon to show their support for a drug-free environment. So now, therefore, the mayor and members of the Vista City Council do hereby proclaim October 23rd through 31st, 2022 as Red Ribbon Week in the city of Vista. So, congratulations on that. Thank you. We're going to do a photo. Hold on, let me put this all down. Much stuff tonight.
All right.
Come back here.
Oh, thank you.
We'll get a picture taken out of this.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay,
Thanks so
thank
much.
you.
All right, thank you.
We actually have, how we do this, we have a speaker, Erica Leary, who wants to speak on this, but is Tasha Horvath there yet? No. I don't see her. Okay, we're going to hold Tasha, and we'll kind of squeeze her in when she gets here, but we'll have Erica Leary as the speaker. We'll just go ahead and go back and go ahead with the meeting.
Thank you very much for breaking protocol and allowing a brief comment about a presentation. My name's Erica Leary, Program Manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition, and I want to extend my great commitment to drug prevention and Red Ribbon Week. And I just want to make sure that you all and all the residents of Vista knew about an event tomorrow evening sponsored by Supervisor Desmond and the District Attorney Summer Steffen at the One Safe Place in San Marcos. It's a fentanyl forum, open to everybody, parents and teens especially encouraged to attend. It's from 5:30 to 7:30, free. Please come. Fentanyl is raging across the nation. You'll hear from parents and their tragic loss, and no better time to prevent this problem from spreading. So I encourage you to attend, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start a meeting, and when Tasha gets here, we'll oh, she came in? Yep. Oh, how about that timing? Okay, so.
I heard my name, so I came straight out. Is that appropriate? Okay. Wait.
So I want to, this is our first our presentation is by Assembly Member Tasha Borner Horvath, and the Boys and Girls Club CEO Matt Cormus, and John Meyer, and Susan. Is Susan here? Oh, all of you, come on up, please.
So good evening, Mayor and council members and members of our community. It's been my honor to serve you for the last 4 years as your assembly member, and it's been a pleasure for me to celebrate our collaborative efforts in bringing state funds to the City of Vista's projects. Together, we have successfully brought almost 16 million in state funding for Vista projects, including 6.5 million for the 22-23 fiscal year alone. This evening, I brought a few ceremonial checks. They might be a little wet for wear because I don't know if you know, but we have a giant rainstorm with lightning and thunder outside that we got to drive through here. And I really don't think you should cash these tonight. Not only are they wet, but they probably won't cash the bank, but the states will transfer you the money. And I'm thrilled that we're first bringing $1.4 million from the state budget for the city to install dozens of public EV charging stations across the city. One of the things, let's clap for that. As you know, the state is poised to cease the sale of gas-powered vehicles by 2035, and it's imperative that all of our communities are prepared for this transition, and that transition starts now. And Vista is leading the way with public chargers, and this will increase the availability of public EV charging stations, making the ownership of EVs equitable for Vista residents, whether you own your home or you rent and you're in an apartment. We have a way to help you charge your cars, and the state goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So with that, I'll walk up and we'll take a picture with this first check. And so the second check is the second project we secured funding for this year is the Louis Duran Park Community Center and Sheriff's Substation. I know this is near and dear to my friend Karina's heart, and she advocated very strongly for this project, and it'll provide crucial park resources for the 1,100 residents that live within the half-a-mile radius of the park. We know about 20% of these residents live in poverty, and many lack vehicle transportation. This funding will enhance the park's offering for local children and families and relocate the existing sheriff's substation outside of the residential neighborhood. So with that, would you like to come up? We'll present the $3.5 million for that project. Nope, not 3.5, sorry. 1.6, it's all millions of dollars. There's lots of zeros. And lastly, we have a third check, and this one was really important. We managed to squeak it in at the end of the year in the budget. We know that soccer is a favorite sport in the city of Vista, and as sports chair in the assembly, it's the only sport I actually enjoy, but I'm not supposed to say that because Padres are in the playoff, go Padres. But I really appreciate how much the Boys and Girls Club in Vista, we've partnered over the last 4 years, and so it's an honor to help you build a new state-of-the-art indoor soccer arena. And so here in Vista, we know recreational spaces are so vital to our community. They're vital to the health and safety of our children and our families. And the Boys and Girls Club do so many things for all of our families. And so we're helping in a little bit of this. In this particular case, the funding will increase sports accessibility for both the nearly 3,300 youth served by the Boys and Girls Club and the members of the city leagues every year. I look forward to seeing these funds continue to enhance the vibrancy of the city and continue to make it a greener and more equitable place to live. So with that, we can come up and take this with our Boys and Girls Club partners. And this is $3.5 million. In closing, I want to thank our partnership with the entire city council, but especially Mayor Ritter. We have worked together closely before I was even in the assembly. We worked on Sandag together. We've worked on all these projects, and I hear you're terming out and you're not running for reelection. And as you know, due to the redistricting process, I've lost Oceanside, Vista, and Camp Pendleton. I pick up the entire coast from here to Coronado, or not, I am hopefully going to pick up from here to Coronado, including on the Tijuana River sewage, so they gave me a different problem to solve. But it's been an honor to serve with you for the last 4 years. Each and every one of you, your city manager, the city staff, none of those projects would have been possible without your city staff providing my staff all the detailed information that we require to fund state budgets. So I'd like to thank you, Mayor Ritter, for your service all these decades and many years. It's been an honor, and I look forward to continue to working with you in whatever capacity we can in the greater San Diego region. But let's give a round of applause for your city manager and for your city staff. Thank you, everybody, and I continue to wish wonderful things for the city of Vista.
And we thank you immensely for bringing the money that you just did to all of us. So we appreciate that so much. Thank you so much. We've enjoyed working with you also. And everybody doesn't keep Vista in their mind, and so it's nice that you had us in your mind and followed through and got that money for our project. So we thank you. Okay, we're back to business. That was fun business. Yeah. So we are now to our consent calendar. Recommendations on the following consent calendar will be enacted in one motion unless an item is removed from the calendar. Any member of the public can remove an item by submitting a request to speak card to the clerk's secretary. Items removed from the calendar will be considered immediately following the adoption of the calendar. We have 8 consent items this evening, and Deputy Mayor Franklin.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, so please cast your votes. That motion passes unanimously with Councilmember Green not present. That takes us to our discussion items. We have 2 discussion items this evening. The first one is inclusionary housing policy. Community Development and Engineering Director John Conley is going to provide the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much. Before I get going here, we have a inclusionary housing in lieu fee study that was prepared by KMA, the city's consultant. That's part of your staff report. I thought it would be useful to have KMA's representative, Lenny Gavino, give you a little information about how the report was prepared before I go through my items. So I'm going to ask Lenny to come up and make a presentation.
Is this on? It's on? Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Lenny Gavino. I'm a principal with Kaiser Marston Associates, and I'm here with my colleague Paul Mera, who's managing principal with the San Diego office. And both Paul and I have worked together on a number of inclusionary policy analyses, including the city of Del Mar, Solana Beach, Encinitas, Carlsbad, as well as San Diego. And for the inclusionary housing in lieu fee study that we prepared for you, there are kind of 3 key steps that we do for the assignment, which are shown on the slide there. The first is to review what other housing in lieu fees are charged in other cities and jurisdictions in the county of San Diego. Then we formulated 8 development concepts representative of future development that would take place in both the TOD areas of the city as well as the balance of the city overall. And then we use these concepts in order to prepare financial performers to estimate the in lieu fee. And there are two approaches that we use to estimate the fee. The first approach involves an estimate of financing gap, assuming the affordable housing is developed on-site as part of a market rate development. And then the second approach is coming up with a fee based on a funding gap for 100% affordable housing development financed with low-income housing tax credits. So we developed 4 residential development concepts for the TOD areas, and those included stack flats over tuck-under parking, stack flats over podium parking, and a mixed-use development. And for each of these different concepts, we prepared financial performance to estimate what the financing gap would be if we were to include affordable housing on-site at 20% low income. And then for the off-site scenario, we assumed 100% affordable housing development financed with low-income tax credits. And so you can see a site area that we assumed ranged between 0.75 to 1 acre. And then we had a range of density ranging from 44 units to the acre to 100 units to the acre. And then again, we assumed 20% of those units would be affordable for lower income households. And then for the balance of the city, we came up with scenarios of lesser density of garden apartments, stack flats over tuck-under parking, and stack flats with wrap parking. And you'll see there those have a higher site area than what we assumed for the TOD areas, and less density as well.
You know what, for people, because the people in the audience, I'm not sure everybody knows, it's kind of like internal lingo. Maybe you could explain like the TOD, when you say TOD, that means transit-oriented development, the TOD does. And then also you might want to tell them the difference in the different, like garden apartments versus a stacked flat, under tuck, and wrap. I think people in the audience, and the kids are here, from the high school, they might just, if you could just briefly tell that, I think that would be good for people who don't know that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
John, do it.
So for the TOD areas, those are development that would take place within 3/4 of a mile of the various Sprinter stations, and the balance of the city is outside of those TOD areas, okay? And then for the different types of development, let me go back. So stack flats would be your typical apartment type complex, with the bottom floor being for parking. And then stack flats is similar. Stack flats over podium is similar, but then the parking would be more of an enclosed garage. And then mixed use over podium, subterranean is similar to the podium, except for one floor would be below grade, and then you would have some retail on the bottom floor of that particular building. And then for the citywide prototypes, garden apartments is kind of our typical 2-3-story apartment building with no elevator, just stairs to access the different units. Stack flats is tuck-under, as we described before. It's the same type of development, apartment units on top of one another with a first level of parking. And then stack flats with wrap parking is a development where you have the apartment buildings would typically surround a parking structure, all at grade. Okay.
I think that'll help. That just helps people who, they're in the audience who don't know those things.
Absolutely. Okay. So like I said before, so the citywide prototypes we assumed less dense development compared to the TOD areas. And then what we did is we ran performas for each of those concepts. And so the outcome of those analyses showed that the average financing gap assuming the inclusionary units were built on site, for the on-site scenarios, we're about 70,000 per unit for the TOD, and for the citywide on-site was 32,000 per unit. Those would be high fees relative to what we see in other jurisdictions, and so we would recommend that the city look more at the gaps associated with the off-site development. And so for the TOD areas, that was about $33,250 per unit. And for citywide, that was $10,700. So taking that into consideration, the potential fees that we would recommend, assuming 20% of units at low income for the TOD areas would be a range of $30,000 to $35,000 per unit, or $40 to $45 a square foot. And then for the citywide, assuming 8% of low income, we assumed $10,000 per unit, or $10 to $15 a square foot. And then in comparison to those fees, compared to what we're seeing in other jurisdictions within the county, you'll see on a per unit basis, for the TOD, they would be much higher than what we're seeing in other areas of the county. And then on a per square foot basis, it would be higher in the TOD areas, but within the range for the citywide areas. Okay.
So intent there, Mayor, was just to give you an idea of where the fees came from in terms of the in lieu fee that we would be charging. To give the audience a little background, when we met last time to talk about inclusionary units, the direction from the council was to require inclusionary at 20% low income for the transit-oriented development, or TOD areas, which were defined as 3/4 of a mile from the transit centers, the Sprinter stations in town. And then the rest of the city, the citywide, was at 8% low income. So the fees are based, the fees that were identified in KMA studies were based on that direction. If we receive some different direction tonight, or a change in numbers or percentages, we'll have them go back and revise the study to reflect that. I just wanted to give you some background because there's a lot of numbers being thrown around, and I wanted to make sure everyone understood where those fees came from. 1 second. So as I mentioned, the council met in April and directed us to do some analysis of an inclusionary program. Inclusionary housing is essentially setting aside affordable housing within a market rate development as a requirement for developing the site. So if the city were to adopt an inclusionary policy, market rate developer comes in and builds their project, whatever percentage the city is going to mandate of inclusionary units, that number of affordable units has to be incorporated into the project as a condition of approval. So that's the direction that we're going in. We had a program that required that up to 2015. The council removed it in 2015, so we're revisiting it now. So we had KMA prepare the in lieu fee study. We went over that. It gives you some idea of where the fees would be depending on where we set it. As part of the study that KMA prepared, because they do this for all the jurisdictions within the county, they identified a few issues that we feel like we need to vet with the council before we come back with a formal policy. So that's really what I'm here to discuss this evening. So the first issue that was raised that I wanted to bring to the council's attention is there's an Assembly Bill 1505 that was active in 2018. This was primarily a result of a legal decision that made it difficult for cities to impose inclusionary requirements on for rent projects. So the legislature took some action to address that in AB 1505, which allows us to adopt inclusionary requirements for rent projects. But in doing so, they also required that cities that adopt inclusionary requirements that exceed 15% may have to prepare a economic feasibility study because they want to make sure that anything over 15% is not unduly constraining the production of housing. So HCD's job is to make sure that the city can provide affordable housing and isn't creating barriers for development for affordable housing. And so the direction from the council within the transit-oriented development areas only was a 20% requirement for inclusionary. Because that exceeds the 15% that's mandated by HCD, we would have to prepare an economic feasibility study in order to adopt a standard that high, which would have to go to HCD for review and approval before we could establish that. The staff estimates it would take somewhere between 3 to 4 months and cost somewhere between $40,000 to $50,000 to prepare that study. And so we wanted to bring that to the council's attention and ask if you want to put that additional effort into adopting an ordinance at 20%, or if you want to consider a revised lower percentage of 15% or less. One of the things that we should consider in adopting an ordinance for inclusionary housing is density bonus. So this is the state's density bonus chart. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but it essentially identifies what the percentage of affordable units are required in order to be eligible for the density bonus allowances under the state law. And if you notice in the chart, when you get up to 10% at all of the income categories, you're eligible for density bonus. If you're below 10%, only if you're providing very low income units are you eligible for density bonus. So the council's direction was to provide low income units or lower, which is 60 to 80% of annual median income. And at the low level, at 10%, you're provided the density bonus allowance. So there's a consideration here for getting affordable units versus developers getting a lot of concessions and incentives to build their project, which could include reduced parking, increased building height, reduced setbacks, et cetera, in effort to reduce the cost of their project. The density bonus allowances that the state provides gives you all of these automatic exclusions from the city's requirements, which can benefit a developer, but also take away the city's control of how the project looks and feels and at what density it's built at. So the council has complete discretion here to determine whatever percentage of affordable units they want to require as an inclusionary policy. But if they go above 10%, we're into the density bonus world, which means any project that qualifies for the inclusionary policy would be a density bonus project, would receive less parking and concessions and incentives under the law. So just something to consider in terms of how you characterize that number. The second issue is the level of affordable units. So the council directed staff to develop a policy that requires low-income units, which I mentioned are 60 to 80% of annual median income. The staff there was also some discussion at that April meeting about potentially including moderate income units in that requirement, but that was not the direction we received at the end. So we just want to make sure that the council is consistent with making sure that the inclusionary policy is only focused on low income units or lower, or if you want to include a percentage of moderate income, which would be 80 to 120% of annual median income in that. So the council has a discretion of, if let's say they want a 10% requirement, 5% could be low and 5% could be moderate. It could all be low, it could all be very low, it could all be moderate. I mean, you can kind of jump around, but we just want to make sure that we're clear on what level of affordable housing you want to provide with this inclusionary requirement. So that's the second issue. The third issue is how we're going to provide those units. So in our former policy that was rescinded in 2015, we required that inclusionary units be built on site. So any market rate developer that came into the city had a certain percentage of units they had to build. They were all required to be built in their project. There was no off-site allowance. There was an in-lieu fee that was permitted only for partial units. So if you had 3.2 units you had to build, you could pay the fee for the 0.2, but the 3 units had to be built on site. As KMA identified in their study, building an affordable unit within the TOD area in a market rate project would cost a developer about $70,000. If it were to be done in the citywide area, it would cost a developer about $33,000. So the recommendation from KMA and staff's recommendation is to consider allowing those units to be built off-site and collecting the fee from developers that are building market rate projects. This would give us more flexibility and the ability to build more affordable units off-site rather than requiring them on-site in a market rate development. So we're asking for clarification on that issue as well. The fourth issue is transit-oriented development. So the council directed staff to consider TOD areas around the transit centers, which were defined as 3/4 of a mile from the transit centers. A typical TOD area, and what state law defines TOD as, is a half mile from transit, and that's considered to be a reasonable distance for people to walk to transit. And so in the planning world, we see at a half mile, it's fairly convenient, and you will see a fair number of people walking to get to services within a half mile. At 3/4 of a mile, it thins out. You also capture a lot more development area with a 3/4 mile radius than you do with a half mile radius. And so those inclusionary requirements are increased as the radius goes out. So we would just like to know if the council wants to stick to the 3/4 mile radius because it's a little unique, or if you want to stick to a half mile radius, or if we just want to require a citywide requirement and eliminate the TOD. This is a map that shows, it's in your packet, the half mile radiuses around the transit centers are in blue, and the 3/4 mile radius is in brown. It's also in your packet, as I mentioned. And the final issue is that there are 2 active development applications that are in the pipe that have been submitted and are being processed by planning. Those are projects at 1304 North Santa Fe and 165 Eucalyptus Avenue. Both of the applicants for those projects have been notified of the meeting and the discussion tonight. The one issue that we wanted to vet with the council is the implementation of the policy. So depending on the direction we get tonight, the staff will come back hopefully in November with a final policy for adoption. We would recommend that projects that are submitted after that date have the policy applied to them and not projects retroactively. The developers that have submitted applications have done their financial analyses and assumed their project costs based on what was submitted and what was in place at the time that they submitted. And so I'm sure it would be a huge financial burden for them to find out now that they would have to provide inclusionary units. So we'd like some direction on that issue. And those are the 5 things that staff is asking for direction on this evening. And I'm prepared to answer any questions. Thank you.
I think we should take each item one at a time and determine that, but we have quite a few speakers. Would you like to hear the speakers first? Okay, we'll do that. We have quite a few speakers, so what we'll do is I'll call out the 2 names, and if the second one would come up and stand over here so that they're ready to speak. We'll start with Kelly Batten and followed by Rebecca Williams. And so if Kelly would come up and then Rebecca would come over here and stand and wait.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Kelly Batten, and I'm here on behalf of the Building Industry Association of San Diego. Inclusionary policies are self-defeating. Is it a tax on new home buyers and middle-income families, our teachers, first responders, and even our own grown children who cannot afford additional costs on a home? Therefore, any inclusionary policies should exempt middle-income housing units at 80 to 150% AMI. Most home builders are currently using density bonus, as was mentioned by Mr. Connolly, especially along our transit corridors where they build 10% affordable homes and can offset costs through exemptions or waivers, like reduction of setbacks and exemptions of parking and open space requirements, to name a few. Robust incentives should be included in the inclusionary policy to offset those costs and those allowed under the state density bonus. And if inclusionary policies are adhered to, be allowed to develop by right, which decreases long permit times, which can significantly reduce costs. There should also be a 3-year phase-in of in lieu fees, as developers have already calculated costs in the financing of upcoming projects. All projects in the pipeline should be grandfathered in and be exempt from the new policy, as was also mentioned by Mr. Connolly. We all know we are in a housing crisis. Homes are too expensive, and we just don't have enough supply. Burdensome regulations like inclusionary housing increases costs, making homes at all levels less affordable. We need to be reducing fees and regulations so we can build homes for all San Diegans. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Williams, and followed by Jacqueline Zimmer.
Good evening, Vista City Council members. My name is Rebecca Williams, and I'm with the law firm Allen Matkins, and I'm appearing on behalf of Kyer Builders Incorporated. In its presentation this evening, staff recommended that the new inclusionary housing requirement only apply to projects making application submittals after the inclusionary ordinance is codified. Should the council decide to move forward with the inclusionary ordinance, Kyer supports staff's recommendation to exclude all projects already in process. Kyer currently has an active development application in process with the Planning Division for a 36-unit apartment project at 1304 North Santa Fe, which is highlighted on page 93 of the staff report. As you know, a significant amount of time and money goes into planning, designing, and financing a multifamily residential project, and Kyer has already expended significant amounts of time and resources on this particular project. Kyer submitted a pre-application package for the project over a year ago in June of 2021 and had an early design review meeting with the Planning Commission in February 2022. The project is expected to go to Planning Commission in December of 2022. Over the last 16 months, Kyer has worked with city staff to design a project that meets currently applicable city requirements. The project has slim economic margins, and since submitting their initial project application, Kyer has also had to deal with rising inflation, ongoing supply chain issues, an undersupplied labor market, and a 30% increase in construction costs. If the new inclusionary housing requirement were retroactively applied, it would completely change the project economics and necessitate a redesign, thereby delaying the project and increasing the costs of providing this much-needed workforce housing in Vista. In addition, your neighbor city, Oceanside, is also going through an evaluation of its inclusionary housing policies. Our understanding is that Oceanside will protect the rights of developers that are currently working through the application process by exempting them from any new inclusionary requirements that may be adopted. Kyer encourages the city to follow Oceanside's lead, protect the rights of developers who have invested significant time and money into the application process, and conserve city staff resources associated with re-reviewing revised applications. For all of these reasons, Kyer respectfully requests that the City Council support staff's recommendation to exempt Kyer's pending project from any new inclusionary housing requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jacqueline Zimmer, followed by Luz Godina.
I am Dr. Jacqueline Zimmer, a retired psychologist. I have worked in 3 hospitals, run a Doctor of Psychology training program in a university, run 2 residential treatment centers, and had a 23-year private practice. But in 1969, I was homeless. I had left a religious order after 8.5 years. I had $500 to my name and a new job at the home office of Jack in the Box at $1.95 an hour, 20 hours a week. Meanwhile, I was a full-time student. A fellow student told me of a place to rent near her place. Though filthy dirty, it was $85 a month, so I took it. The elderly mother and daughter owners never raised the rent. After 6 years, I graduated and moved on, but I cannot forget the reality that I could not have a PhD without their kindness. There are people in this town in the same position I was in. For the last 5 years, the raising of rents has been damaging to them. When I was volunteering in a thrift store, I recall an elderly mother and daughter, each of whom had their rent raised beyond their funds. So each was now living in her own car. Having a home is not a luxury. Like you, I see the campers around here. People tell me of their fears of homeless people on the streets. In fact, I got a call on Sunday from a friend who is disabled and cannot drive, but who was on the verge of tears telling about what it's like to be on the streets. There's the nextdoor.com website where I often see scenes of people's ring bells recording people coming onto their property at night and perhaps stealing things or disrupting things. You folks have made a lovely town to live in. The kites, the statues, the paintings, the wave, the sports complex.
Dr. Zimmer, I need you to finish up. Your
Just
time is
to
up.
name a few, it takes action by a city as a whole to maintain its luster. Inclusionary housing is an answer. There are others.
Dr. Zimmer,
I
your
just
time
say
is up.
do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Luz Godina, and then followed by Lourdes Farhat.
Good evening. My name is Luz Godina. I've owned my home in Vista for over 20 years. If I had to purchase or rent a home at this time, I would not be able to afford it. I'm part of St. Francis Church, which has 9,000 registered families, and San Diego Organizing Project. I've heard from many family, friends, and parishioners who are having problems finding affordable housing. Inclusionary housing would help somewhat so we could have more affordable housing, which we need in our community.
Thank you. Lourdes Farhat, followed by Teresa Perez.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lourdes Farhat. I recently retired a year ago. I was a registered nurse, NICU, but we know homelessness, and we see everywhere it affects mental health, health issues, and people's dignity. So I will make it personal. I was single that time. I owned my home. I'm taking care of my elderly mother. I earn good wage as a registered nurse and paying my mortgage. But one day, my doctor calls me, well, the biopsy that we got from you is cancer. So the fear came to me, but I said, I'm going to beat this. But 3 months of my treatment, here comes the work calling me, the human resources saying, well, you have to come back in 4 months because we're going to not maintain your position. And you have no more insurance after 4 months if you can come back. So here comes my fear. I'm angry at the same time. All the work that I did having a home will be gone if I cannot work. And I was so weak, I can hardly move. So what I did was went back to work, even though I can hardly move. I can hardly drive. Every night, every day that I work, I have to stop in a parking lot because I can't go home because I'm getting dizzy, I'm so weak. So it's just take seconds, days for somebody's things to be taken, even your own home, because of so many reasons. So for me, I think I'm here and to be the voice of these people in our city, just so that God healed me, so I would be here to help in some ways, to talk to you that can vote for this, have the power to have inclusionary housing to help these people that we don't know what goes on, whether they're educated, they have good jobs, some things can happen like what happened to me. But God is good, I'm here, I'm back, and I'm retired after 41 years, and here I am trying to help the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Perez, followed by Jim Riggenbach.
Hello, my name is Teresa Perez. I'm community organizer with San Diego Organizing Project, where is a faith-based organization. We organize in 20 plus congregations, and we belong to a state and national network. I'm the organizer in the San Francisco Catholic Church here in Vista. As my partner already mentioned, is 9,000 families registered. We try to hear our community. We collect a survey, 500 surveys, and the top issue is housing. We are not surprised, right? Because this one is an issue. We hear it's a crisis. So we have been fighting for inclusionary housing for more than a year. We were in the inclusionary housing workshop, and we were happy to hear. We were like expecting 20%, and the negotiation and communication so low for 20% in the transit and 8% in the city. And now we see the numbers changing. So I'm here to asking, like, whatever change that you make, just think about the community that need house. I'm just like in my personal story. So I was a student working in a restaurant to go to the university, and I was applying for a low-income apartment. I had to wait 5 years at that point. I don't know how many years people have to wait now. And I get the apartment. After that, it changed my life. So to have a low-income apartment give me the opportunity to go through the university and finalize my career, and now became an organizer. So and now I can help others. So I'm here to ask you to support and any change that you make to ordinance that benefit the people that need houses, not the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Rickenbach, followed by Greg Dracos.
Good evening. I would like to provide some historical context as this issue goes back several years. On April 28th, 2015, the council voted to eliminate the city's longstanding inclusionary housing requirement. Director Conley gave the report that night and noted, quote, "The proposal to eliminate inclusionary housing would affect our ability to provide affordable housing by reducing the number of affordable housing units we could require." He also said, quote, "It would reduce our funding for affordable housing because it would eliminate in lieu fees." He also noted that the Planning Commission did not recommend eliminating the policy. Yet, the council voted to eliminate it. Mayor Ritter and Deputy Mayor Franklin were on the council at that time and both voted to eliminate. A rep from the BIA spoke that night and assured the council that the industry would work with the council to come up with creative ways to continue building affordable housing. I'm wondering if that happened, especially by the for-profit companies. We had it for 30 years. We've now been without it for 7 years. We have a housing crisis. We have a worsening homelessness issue. There was little explanation given for what was wrong with it the previous 30 years before elimination. Mayor Ritter gave no comment at the time, and Mr. Franklin's reasoning was that there were so many people in need of affordable housing that the policy was hampering building and thus a negative. I would have pulled the exact quote, but it was a rather long explanation. I encourage all to watch the video. It's on YouTube, April 28th, 2015, near the end of the meeting. I hope to hear about before and after analysis and any analysis about the effects of that vote in 2015. And I also want to point out inclusionary housing helps to combat segregation. And so I hope that's considered when thinking about this. Thank you.
Greg Dracos.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. As you likely know, my name is Greg Dracos with Cross Real Estate Investors. We are the applicant for 165 Eucalyptus Ave. As an applicant, we echo everything that Ms. Williams said from Alan Madkins representing Kyer Builders. But I'm not here tonight to speak as an applicant. I'm here tonight to speak as an individual and as a student of economic policy. Inclusionary housing is great politics, it's bad policy, and I'd like to explain why. What we have in California is not a demand-side problem. We keep focusing on trying to contain demand, right? We need to make affordable housing, have density bonus, all these market-distorting legislative policies. What we really have fundamentally, and I say this again as an individual, is a structural fundamental supply problem in the state of California. From the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, California is the 49th out of 50 states
for housing units per capita. The only state that has fewer housing units per capita than California is Utah, surprisingly. Alaska and North Dakota have more housing units per person than California. California has the largest total structural deficit of housing of any state by far, by an order of magnitude of 10 times. So fundamentally, the problem we're facing is a supply side problem, not a demand side problem. We could not regulate enough housing into affordability to solve the problem. So what's actually happening with these policies, and this is true of density bonus, although it's less impactful, what's actually happening with these housing policies is we're saying, hey, you meet the threshold for very low or low income, so you're down here and you can afford this. Well, those units cost the same amount of money to produce. On average, it costs $400,000 to $425,000. In some cases, depending on the product type, $450,000 per unit to build a unit of multifamily housing. What makes up for the lack of rent or the affordable or the capped rent of affordable is raising rents on the rest of the units. So everyone here, I suppose, is familiar with the Gini index that measures the wealth gap between rich and poor. These policies are actually exacerbating that. And again, I know that I know they sound great, and they sound great from a political standpoint, if we could label it that way. But as a policy standpoint, as an economic policy, it's awful, and it's making things worse. Inclusionary housing, at least with density bonus, you're getting additional units to offset some of that cost. With inclusionary housing, it's simply a cost. So if you talk about adding another $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in cost to build these units, or in lieu fees, all you're doing is raising the rents on the one unit while keeping the other ones lower and making the problem worse. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your explanation. Okay, that's the end of our speakers. And so if we'd like to take number one first, if we could. And I see I have Councilmember Melendez.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Conley, and to KMA for providing some presentations for us, and thank you to the speakers for being here as well. I'll definitely speak on number one. I understand from my briefing with Mr. Conley that it would be a great challenge to produce more housing if we were to hold that initial request of 20% affordability. And it is difficult to have a really robust conversation here tonight because our full council isn't here, including one of the members that was in support of this. So, I can kind of see how the lines would be drawn. I think it's great that we can provide feedback, but in terms of being able to have a majority to provide direction, that's probably going to be difficult. So I would say that I am supportive of staff's recommendation to reduce the percentage of affordability in those transit areas. And I would not be in favor of having an economic feasibility study at this time. I don't think that it's necessary. I think that it's a cost to the city that I don't want to endeavor into, especially we can't anticipate the outcome of that. So that would be my response to number one. And do I have time to respond to the other? There were 5 topics. Are we going to go each?
I'd like to each one. I'd like to do one and then go to 2. I'd like to go through each one individually, if that's okay.
Okay. I just have, I'll save my other comments then. So that will be my comment for number 1 so far. Thanks.
Councilmember Contreras.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly, for the presentation, and to our consultant as well for going through. Obviously, we got new housing requirements that we just voted on not too long ago. But I will just preface my comments by saying that not having affordable housing is the real attack on working families. Not being able to afford a place to live doesn't help anybody. we have a significant crisis facing us. And I've seen, we had a developer not too long ago come over here to council for North County Square who brought forward 6% affordable. And we said that wasn't enough. And guess what? They brought more percents over, and it's still penciled out. So, I want to be able to provide different types of concessions when needed. I'm not in favor of, with the new laws from the state, of triggering some of these issues, right, where we don't have as much local control over the project. But we don't have enough affordable housing in the city of Vista, which is why our rents have increased year over year dramatically. We have a really young city. Our city has a median age of like 31.9. These individuals need to have a place where they can stay here in our city while they go to school, while they pursue their first career, a place that they can call home where there's stability. If the market would have solved the affordability crisis, then since we repealed inclusionary housing, we probably would have seen some kind of fix come forward. Instead, we led the county with our rents increasing year over year. Workforce housing, however you want to call it, if you're making $60 an hour, you still can't afford market rate. That's at 120% AMI. At minimum, we should be doing 120% AMI throughout the city, deed restricted, so that we have stability for Vistans. So, we can talk all we want about economics, but I can tell you that I see the reality. The reality is that people are scared to lose what they already have because they won't be able to find another place to live in that they can afford. I have constituents that are living 6 people in a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom. We need to see more affordability in our city. These are our working families. So if we're going to go one by one, I'm going to say, okay, you know what? I'll be flexible with this. Let's take a look at reducing the amount in transit-oriented development areas. I'll be in favor of not going with the recommended 20% as to not trigger certain mandates from the state. But to say that we need 0, that this is a policy that isn't going to help, is absolutely ridiculous, and I will not ever believe it because I haven't seen it come to fruition that the market can provide housing for all people. So, seeing the density bonus chart, at 10%, that's the threshold, correct, where we kind of lose control at this point.
Correct.
I'm okay with reducing it to 9%. And is this also the time where we provide feedback on the different AMIs? Or is that in the future?
That's number 2, I believe.
All right. So I'll save the rest of my comments for number 2. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Franklin.
Tell us again why the state of California feels the need to conduct a study if we go to 20%.
The state's requirement is based on a potential barrier to housing that could be created by anything above 15%. So any jurisdiction that adopts higher than 15% inclusionary has to prepare a study so that they can determine whether it unduly burdens the production of housing within that jurisdiction.
Why do you think the state made that policy?
Because the higher percentage of affordable units you put in a project, it's more of a burden on the developer for market rate.
But it sounded like you're implying that it may ultimately lead to production of fewer units.
If you impose a high inclusionary requirement, there are some market rate developers that will not build their projects here. That's probably true.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly support the lower number because I do think the higher number would tend to be a barrier. And we have heard from some developers that probably they're not going to look to build in Vista with these high inclusionary numbers. And so I would be on board with staff's recommendation there.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. I think that I don't want to trigger a density bonus because that means the city loses all control over the project. Means no park. They could do no parking, building height. They could do. We just don't have any. And if there is a density bonus, then we can't even talk about what concessions. There would be no concessions because they will do whatever by right they can build it. So I would support. I mean, I definitely would not support 20%. I don't believe actually I don't actually believe in inclusionary housing because I think it makes middle income people pay for when it makes their rents higher and their cost of their housing higher to pay for people. So it hurts. I mean, it helps people with lower income, but it hurts the middle income people that are trying to pay their rent. So I don't think it's an answer, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. So anyway, it looks like 3 of you will go with the staff recommendation and go with the 9% will be okay. So Councilmember Melendez.
Cool. I guess we're moving on to number 2, kind of following.
Before we go there, I just want to make sure we're all clear. What I'm hearing is 9%. Is that a citywide requirement for 9%, or are you referring to the TOD areas? I heard Councilmember Melendez mention 15% in the TOD areas. So would you prefer to keep it at 15% and have a higher requirement in the TOD? Or would you prefer to have it at 9 and have it as a citywide policy with no TOD exception?
I can clarify that. So I would be favorable to 9%. I know initially we talked about 8% and then 20% in our TOD areas. Even with speaking with folks from the San Diego Housing Federation today, they reflected that 20% is quite high and can create conditions that are burdensome. That said, we currently don't have any percentages of inclusionary requirements. And my perspective is that there are incentivizing policies that we can develop, and there are compulsory policies that we can develop. The recent California state density bonus requirements are incentives. Once you get to that 10% affordability, you're allowed to have more robust building, and you're allowed to, reduce your setbacks and reduce your parking. And so that is an incentivizing policy for a developer. The gap that we see now in the city of Vista is in that 9% area where there's not really an incentive to produce those affordable units. And I think that that's exactly where we can step in as a local municipality and create a compulsory policy that would produce those units, whether they be on-site or through an in-lieu fee process. So that would be my clarification on my perspective. Did you want to hear from everyone else as well?
I think that gives me a majority.
Okay.
Thank you.
And with that, I also want to just make it clear that this is not a tax. The premise that those who are in market rate units will pay more due to affordable units being required is not necessarily true, factual, and it's quite misleading. The cost of a development does not necessarily equate to the price of the units. In order to deliver for the shareholders, a developer is going to charge the maximum amount that the market will allow. So regardless of there being affordable units required, the market will determine how much a developer can price a market rate unit. That's exactly what we expect to see in a market rate development, is the market driving the cost of those units. What we may see a change in is the profit margin of the developer. Yes, with an affordable housing requirement and different financing tools that the developer is eligible for or utilizes, there may be a shrinkage of their profit margin. So I don't want to mislead the public with certain comments that this policy is a tax on market rate renters when the market is going to decide what those units are priced at. And I think when we go into the income levels, the income brackets for inclusionary, I would like to see all the options. I know that it has been kind of a revelation in our council, recognizing that, damn, if you are making, what is it, $60 an hour, you said, Councilmember Contreras, you should be able to afford to live in Vista, right? So if you're developing in Vista, I really want us to have a higher level of accountability to ensure that people of all income levels can afford to live here in a way that is integrated. But I'm not super set on, okay, it has to be 60% AMI, right? It has to be 80% AMI. I really would love to see some research and information brought back to us that reflects the whole gamut of what our options are. What was my other comment with that? This may be, nope, that's the in lieu fee question I have. Okay. I know that the in lieu fees are affected by the income level that is required, the affordability level. So I think that'll be another important bit of this conversation, but I would like to see all of it across the board. Thanks.
Councilmember Contreras.
I too, when it comes to the different levels, we want to ensure that Vistans with all income levels are able to afford a place, not just now, but in perpetuity. That's what really builds strong communities, is when you can have stakeholder ownership in your community. You can build community, and you can't do that if you're having to move from place to place just to chase the cheapest rent, because it's becoming, very quickly extinct. So I think it is important that we have definitely some between 60 and 80%, but that we're also taking a look at 80 to 120% AMI. It's extremely important. We have our first responders, they're having issues being able to get housing too. And that's really important for our first responders to live in the city of Vista if they can. If not, then, closer. Just in case there's an emergency, it's real important for them to be close to where they work. And that's true for all my coworkers on staff. So I want to be able to give people the opportunity to enjoy Vista without worrying that they're going to have to leave Vista and move somewhere else because they have made a home here. They have friends here. They have a network here. They have a career here. They have, they go to church here, whatever the case might be. But I do think that having a mix between 60 and 120% is important. I've talked to some developers and they're like, hey, let me see what I can do to figure out how to do a ton of units at 120% AMI. So where there's a will, there is a way. And I've seen it happen while I'm here on council. So there's definitely a multitude of examples, not just, within my tenure here, but if you look at the entire historical record of even market rate developers being able to have flexibility to be able to increase and have some affordable units, especially in the 80 to 120% AMI. So I am in favor of a mix of it, but we definitely need to have a certain percentage. It can't just all be 80 to 120%. I definitely want to see some between 60 and 80% AMI. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Just to clarify, I would be in favor of, I'm not sure I'm hearing clarity, I don't know if you are, on a citywide number or which number near a TOD. Are we drilling on that?
What I am hearing is that there's a 9% citywide requirement that we'll be coming back with.
Okay. Just to be on the record, I'm for the lower number. Absolutely, the market sets the price of housing. Housing is a commodity. There is no argument whatsoever with the idea that housing that's not governed or restricted in price by the government, the market absolutely sets a price to that. Developers and builders and owners will offer a property at the absolute highest value that the market can command because it's in their financial interest to do so. The point that's being made is that when you increase the cost to provide the supply, now it doesn't make financial sense to build that supply until the market price, until demand is so high that there's enough demand to pay a higher price to cover the additional costs. When you raise the price to create something, a commodity, you are artificially constraining the supply of that commodity. And therefore, you are guaranteeing that on average, that commodity will be more expensive. And therefore, yes, you are driving up the market value of housing for the 91 people out of 100 who will live in a market-based unit, and for all the students and for everybody who's listening tonight to our council meeting. I have this question to ask you. What do you think your odds are of being in the 9 or in the 91? We're talking about 60% of AMI. The number $60 an hour has been thrown around. There's 2,080 working hours in a year. That's $124,000 a year. That's nearly $50,000 more than the average Vista family makes. According to this census, we're at an average family income of $73,163 in the city of Vista. Personally, I talk about 3 models of subsidized housing or of low-income housing or affordable or whatever you want to call it. There's the direct subsidy where we provide land, where tax credits are offered. That's where everybody who pays into the government, be they rich or poor, all shares in the cost. That's a proportional, fair way to share. Then there's the bond investor-funded model. That's a free market model that may have some direct subsidies as well. Has some tax credits, also some direct subsidy. That's the second model. And then the third model is this inclusionary model. And the inclusionary model makes the people who live, if you build 100 new apartments, and we're going to make 9 of them are going to be held at a subsidized rent, Now you're making the 91 that buy the other units, you're increasing the cost of those units. Again, market rate, the free market sets the price of housing, but when we constrain the supply, the price goes up, okay? That's how we get the nexus between this policy and higher housing costs. Now, ask yourself, do the people that live in apartments or condos, do they represent the top half of income earners? Or is it more likely that they represent the bottom half of income earners? I think it's logical that probably they represent the bottom half of income earners. You're driving up the cost of housing for exactly the people that qualify for the 9 subsidized units for most of the 91 who are going to afford to live in the adjacent units. So what I want every student here in the audience to ask yourself is, do you think you're going to get one of the 9 units, or is your mathematical probability better to get one of the 91 units? And if you don't make any more money than the person who lives next door in a subsidized unit, but your costs went up while theirs went down, was that a benefit to you? And was that a benefit to everyone? And was the cost shared equally, or was it a regressive tax because only the people who were in the bottom half of, or maybe bottom 60%, depending upon what we select, of income earners are contributing to that? Where in a direct subsidy model, every taxpayer pays into the government, be it sales tax, property tax, income tax, and then those direct subsidies are given back for housing so that the top 1%, the top 50% are contributing equally as well. And what's more important, when we talk about providing housing, we have a huge number of people who are homeless on our streets. And I'm glad that we're talking about building supportive wraparound housing. We need the kind of housing product that helps people who are desperate to afford a product to get off the street. I'm glad that we're doing that. But I truly feel that this policy represents a lottery of sorts where some will win, but the vast majority, if we're going to have 9%, then the 91% lose. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair to the 91% of these students that are here tonight that they're going to have to pay a higher price for housing. The gentleman who spoke, who brought the economic perspective, is absolutely right. If we want to make housing more affordable, then we'll reduce mandates on housing and we will allow people to build more of it. The only way to bring the price of any commodity down is to increase the supply of it. We have to increase the supply. And this policy does exactly the opposite. It's a negative. It's going to cause housing, multifamily, which is typically occupied by the people making lower than the top half of earners and the bottom half. It's going to make their housing more expensive. So I just want to be clearly on record that I oppose the policy for those reasons. I think it's wrong. So thanks.
And I would only add that, you know, they say developers will make less profit. They'll look at it and they'll make less profit because market drives the rents. But the reason we got rid of it is because it constrains development, and then and if they aren't going to make the profit that they want or expect, they won't build. They just, and we went for a long time in Vista, we didn't build anything. So now we have the rents may be high, but we have more housing. That's something we didn't have for many years. So you can make this, but you're going to slow your housing down. I mean, that's your choice. I won't be here, but I'm just telling you that from past experience, and I was here for many years, we didn't build much of anything at all. And then when we did that, it spurred the housing. So I just will let you know that. But you know, again, it's your choice. You guys that are here. So, Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you. I'm glad we're having this discussion. I think that there's some disagreement amongst us, and maybe in a future meeting on this topic, we can allow staff to bring in something empirical for us to look at, right? I think we would all be concerned at this notion that this policy could increase the cost of housing. And I would really love to see something empirical about that. I would counter this argument that constraining the market restricts the production of housing, to just point out one of the very basic ways that we constrain the market, and that's through zoning and height requirements. That's something that we have had implemented in the city for years that constrains the market. So I don't think constraining the market is necessarily a bad thing every single time. We're being very judicious about the way that we go about this inclusionary housing policy. And I would like to see more information from our city staff about any empirical complications that may come with the production of housing due to an inclusionary housing policy. Going on to number 3, the in lieu fee. Off-site, on-site, partial. There's benefit to each. So this would be my perspective. The benefit of requiring an in lieu fee that is so competitive that it requires and creates a condition for the developer to build on site is that we get those units more immediately. We also get more integrated units, right? We have low income with market rate housing. And so those are 2 benefits. In discussing this topic, one of the things that I was made aware of is that the position of the city has changed on this, right? Previously, we had an in lieu fee that was just for partial units. And we really couldn't do all that much with it. But I think now in our current state, we have more funding available from state and federal programming for us to be able to leverage those in lieu fee funds to produce something substantial for the community using those in lieu fees. So with that condition, right, that in lieu fees are appropriately leveraged so that we can get the maximum amount of public benefit, I would be in support of allowing the in lieu fees for the production of off-site housing. But I do have a question for our folks with KMA. I saw in the description of the approaches, right, that are used to develop the in lieu fees, that there's a funding gap for inclusionary housing production off-site. And I would love to know a little bit more of that, because that, I think, is pivotal in this conversation. If we're going to use in lieu fees for production off-site, we need to know that there is going to be funding available and something substantial and tangible for us to utilize. So I'm not sure if our partners can speak to that any further, but that would be one of my questions.
Councilmember Melendez, Paul Maurer with Kaiser Marston.
Hi, Paul.
Principal. Hello. We have 2 approaches in this study to estimating an appropriate in lieu fee. One is if a developer had built it on site, what was the impact to the developer? And the other is if they built it off-site or you built it off-site with their money, what would it cost? So the funding gap is the number we're solving for, and then we based our fee recommendations on those funding gaps. So the recommended fee that you saw on our slide, we based it on the off-site approach because the one for the on-site was so very high. You would be collecting the amount we believe you would need to create the units off-site. That would be your source for the funding gap.
Okay, and would there be additional sources required,
Yes,
say federal or state funding?
Absolutely. The performers we built used low-income housing tax credits and other state funding. So we did, I believe, a 9% low-income housing tax credit scenario. So the project, as you've done here on the Paseo-Santa Fe corridor, you've done 3, I believe, 9% tax credit projects. And then we also ran a 4% tax credit with tax-exempt bonds and additional state funding. There's a lot of state funding programs, they're all competitive, but we've assumed that your developer, whoever builds the affordable housing, would go win that money. That's how it's largely being delivered. And you would contribute the local financial contribution from the source that you collected from the market rate developer.
So this is a great explanation. Not only is the developer responsible for going out and securing those additional funds for the project to be developed off-site, but that would just give our city a lot more reassurance. And my initial understanding of this is that the money sits in a pool for our city staff to administer at a later time.
No, that is correct.
Okay.
Sorry if I've misled you. You would collect an in lieu fee from the market rate developer. They'd be done.
Right.
They fulfill their responsibility. You now have this money in a pot, and you would find an affordable housing developer.
Okay, that makes more sense.
They would implement. They would apply for tax credits. They would apply for state funds and so forth. And your source.
I was like, we're asking a lot more of them than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's
fair.
totally understand. And you gave a couple of examples of the type of funding bricks that we would need, right? So state and federal funding and potentially even more funding that we don't even know about yet. So thank you so much.
Sure.
I feel very confident in our city staff and our city's ability to get the maximum amount of benefit out of in lieu fees. So whereas I do really value the units being built on site because it's something I would consider more integrated, I actually think that we might have the opportunity to get more bang for our buck and be able to produce more housing with leveraging those in lieu fees. So I think I would be favorable to that. Thank you, John Conley.
Councilmember Contreras.
I want to state first that housing is a human right, whether it's a commodity or not. We all deserve housing, and it is such a straw man argument to say that it's a lottery system. It's not, because then the counter to that is if we don't do any affordable units, zero inclusionary housing with zero affordable units built, then no one gets that. So I would rather some people be able to access affordable housing and we grow the affordable housing over the long term than to say, well, it's a lottery system, so we're not going to do it, and because it's not fair to, whatever percentage of people. We need affordable housing at some level. We just do. So when it comes to in lieu fees, similar to Councilmember Melendez, there is a huge value to having integrated housing, no doubt. But one of the things, it's almost like, on this one, I'm almost like, leave it to the developer to decide. If they want to build on site, then great. If they want to not build on site, then we can collect that in lieu fee and put it in our housing fund, and then be able to create more affordable houses, perhaps more permanent supportive housing, right? That has wraparound services. So I think that there's, either way, we're gonna see a benefit, but I definitely like having control over that funding to be able to identify different parcels that we have in the city where we could build units, with knowing that it's going to take us a long time once we identify the site to actually move forward with the project. How long does it take? It's like 4 years or something like that?
That's probably a good estimate, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, on this one, it's, I want to provide enough flexibility to the developer. But, we definitely have to, I think we just have to consider more flexibility when it comes to whether it should be on-site or off-site. because there's so many advantages to both. It's difficult to just say, well, we're just going to do one, or we're just going to do this other one. I think being able to build in some flexibility is important. Thanks.
Oh, Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Franklin.
Thank you. I agree. I think the most important thing about off-site is that it does allow us to include some of those direct subsidies like tax credits or investment of public land. And therefore, as we saw with staff's estimates, we're able to build more units for the same money. So I think that's a better way to use the dollars. I appreciate the pejoratives with regard to basic, economic terms. It feels like maybe an effort to imply things that weren't said. In terms of the quote lottery and the number is 91% is the number of people that we're going to impact who are going to live in multifamily housing who likely earn less than the median income because they're still living in apartments and aspire probably to own a home maybe. So and we're hearing all this talk about $124,000 a year. And I just wonder what goes through the minds of the families that make an average of $73,000 who are hearing us talk about raising the cost of their housing while we refuse to discuss at a more regional level building housing to the east of here, while we talk about building 9-story buildings. It was discussed in our last council meeting. 25 stories was used from the dais here a month or two ago. They're building 20-story building over in San Marcos right now into 16 stories. I don't think the people of Vista want 20-story buildings with no parking. I don't think they moved to Vista to find that. I think they moved here because it was a suburban community that they could find a good quality of life in, where they could afford a home. And I don't think they like the idea of urban densification of the community that they love, that they moved to hopefully, build a life and retire in one day. I think the people that want to live in a 10-story or 20-story building should move to the geography where they're already building those high-rise properties. They could build another 30-story building or another 100-story building in downtown San Diego. It wouldn't change the skyline. There's better transportation options down there. We know there's a lot more employment options down there. I just don't think that the people in this city understand why we're talking about building 9 to 25-story buildings in our city. And I don't think they want it. And because I work for them, I don't want it.
Councilmember Melendez.
So if I could jump in here real quickly, Mayor, I think I have 1, 2, and 3 answered. 4 is moot if we're not going to do a TOD area. So the last issue is whether or not we want to have a policy that's retroactive.
Yeah, I was thinking the transit-oriented area doesn't matter if our levels are the same, 9%, right? I am okay with giving leniency to the projects that are already in the pipe. I think that we are a city that's very hospitable to people who want to build here, and I don't necessarily think that it changes everything to be retroactive. So I'm okay with letting them slide on this one.
Councilmember Contreras.
First, I want to say that literally no one is talking about a 25-story building except for you, Deputy Mayor. So I don't even know where to begin. And the 91% is a logical fallacy because you're making it seem like it's a 1-to-1 when we're looking at units that are going to hold families as well. So like, that doesn't even make sense to me, but I don't even want to get into back and forth. I just think like these arguments are just complete logical fallacies. But in any case, I personally would love to just I know people are probably going to hate me for this. I would love to retroactive everything to 120% AMI just to get a deed restriction. But then, I don't want to open us up to lawsuits. We got lawyers here. But just know that my heart is there at 120% AMI because you can still make a profit off of that. But it's fine. I'll second you in saying that I'll let that slide. You all got in just in time. So I'll take that. And okay, it looks like we only have one more, right? And that's it.
That's it.
Didn't you want, oh yeah, because we're doing citywide. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Awesome, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'll be happy to provide you with the YouTube link of your colleague using the words 25-story building at one of our recent meetings. I know you said nobody was talking about it, but it's actually a direct quote. I went ahead and put that up on YouTube so that everybody could appreciate what was being said.
Okay, let's go to number 5.
I'm sorry, I have my
Well, no, I was accused
request
of-
to speak.
I thought, sorry, I believe it was my turn. I was recognized after you were finished.
It looked like you were finished and then the
No,
mayor
I'm
moved
not
on.
finished.
Okay, well then I want to be recognized after you.
That's quite
We're
all
at
right.
number 5.
Yes, I'm going to speak to that, but it was implied that what I said was not true. And in fact, it is true, and it's on the internet for everybody to see. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, moving on.
Yes, moving right along, I would agree. I would agree that we do not want to apply this retroactively.
I agree. Not until not until we finish this, but I think everybody that's in the pipeline is okay. So back to Karina Contreras.
If you're talking about when we were looking at a sprawl development that the majority of the council approved, where there was a joke made about a 25-story building, that's really disingenuous, if that's what you're talking about. I can't even remember if it was 25, but if you want to splice up videos however you want, that's fine. At some point, I was also called an anti-police protester because I wanted lights in the city, so.
Okay, John, you got all your answers?
Okay, Mayor, if I could summarize here, I have a
Okay.
9% requirement citywide for the inclusionary policy, that we would be bringing a mix of low and moderate units. That's 60 to 80 is low and 80 to 120 is moderate. That we would allow for the in lieu fee for off-site development, and that it would not be retroactive. So I'll be coming back as soon as I visit the Planning Commission with a policy recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yay. Moving on to discussion number 2. Spending plan for excess cannabis revenues. City Clerk Kathy Valdez is going to do the staff report on this.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. The purpose of this item is to get consensus on the spending plan for excess cannabis revenues. An operating budget adjustment item will be brought to the City Council for adoption at a future meeting. So again, we're just looking for consensus tonight. Last year, by consensus, the City Council agreed that cannabis revenues reflected in the general fund for fiscal year 21-22 and fiscal year 22-23 should be capped at $4 million, and that any revenue in excess of that amount should be used to fund special projects. The total amount of cannabis revenues collected in fiscal year 21-22 was $6,809,095. Of that, the $4 million was allocated to the general fund, and $466,396 was appropriated for ongoing projects such as park restroom maintenance, sheriff's deputy, and park rangers that were approved last year when we adopted the mid-cycle update. That leaves $2,342,699 available to allocate this evening. I'm going to provide a quick overview of our current and proposed projects and then seek consensus on each item. The council can then discuss any projects in which there is not consensus or you require further discussion. Unspent funds for fiscal year 21-22 have been rolled over to the existing programs with the exception of those that were approved during budget mid-cycle update. So the first one I want to talk about is cannabis decoy enforcement operations. The Sheriff's Department's been working with their legal team, Special Investigations, and the Department of Cannabis Control to develop protocols. And those operations have not started, but they do anticipate starting those in the fall. Staff recommends utilizing the $20,000 that was allocated last year for this current year. We also have funding in our JAG grant for that, so there's no need to allocate additional funds for 22-23. The youth prevention and early intervention allocation, the intent was to issue an RFP for $50,000 for prevention and $50,000 for early intervention. An RFP was not released. Staff is recommending allocating an additional $100,000 so that we can have two separate RFPs, one for, again, prevention, one for intervention at the higher rate of $100,000, and we would get that RFP issued in January or February of 2023. The scholarship program for nonprofits, we allocate $140,000 to allow nonprofit organizations to provide scholarships for low-income youth to participate in their sport leagues and other extracurricular activities. But despite outreach from staff, we've only had one organization that completed the application and implemented the grant at the time of this writing. Staff believes that the organizations are led by volunteers, which is the majority of these organizations, do not have the manpower to apply for and manage the scholarship program, although we did try to make it as simple as possible. Therefore, staff is recommending changing the program to facilitate the application for scholarship funds from qualifying individuals and expanding the eligible providers to any Vista organization, nonprofit or for-profit, including the city's own programs. This will allow low-income individuals to apply directly to the city for a wider range of extracurricular activities. The administration of the program would require a part-time position that would be dedicated to administering this program. Staff recommends allocating $109,699 for this program, $25,000 for the position, and $84,699 for scholarships, as well as using the remaining scholarship monies from this current year. The last program from last year was increased lighting in neighborhoods. About half of the funding for fiscal year 21-22 was used in conjunction with other available funds for the lighting assessment service contract that you approved this evening. Depending on the current infrastructure at each location, the cost for the equipment and labor to install or upgrade a street light can range from $6,000 to $30,000. A total of $1.08 million has been appropriated for this project, and additional funds have been requested from Congressman Levin. To help ensure adequate funding is available, staff recommends allocating $500,000 for this project for fiscal year 22-23, as well as utilizing the remaining funds from 21-22. I won't talk about the other three because those have already been appropriated. So the new projects that are being recommended, and these have come from council comments on the dais or conversations with the city manager. The first is a social equity study. The council directed staff to explore hiring a consultant through an RFP process to conduct a social equity study related to cannabis and potentially other issues. Staff is in the process of collecting information for the city council's review. However, based on preliminary research, staff is recommending allocating $100,000 for the RFP. And to ensure that this funding is available, we'd like to include that in this recommendation tonight. We'd like to recommend a Post Away Service Club sign. To highlight the service clubs in the city, we're recommending a new and updated monument sign be installed at the corner of Post Away to display the logos of each club. The estimated cost for this is $40,000. Next is playground resurfacing. Staff has identified playgrounds as 6 parks that are in need of resurfacing. The cost to resurface a playground ranges from an estimate of $90,000 to $150,000, depending on the size of the lot. We're recommending allocating $693,000 for this project. Park improvements. Public Works staff has identified a variety of park improvement projects at parks throughout the city, including landscaping, such as drought-resistant planting, mulch, and improving footpaths, amenities such as picnic table and trash can replacement, and field and court improvements, including regrading, reseeding, netting, and court resurfacing. Staff recommends allocating $550,000 for these projects. Safe parking. On June 28, 2022, City Council reviewed the Safe Parking Program RFP and directed staff to proceed with releasing the RFP. The RFP identifies the availability of up to $250,000 in funding. In lieu of using funds from the city's housing fund for operational costs, staff recommends allocating $250,000 in cannabis funds for the program for fiscal year 22-23. Unless there are any questions, or if you'd like to hear from the speakers, I'd like to go through each and see if there's consensus, and probably the easiest way to do that is kind of like we did last year. I've numbered them this time, so you can identify those you want to discuss, and the others will assume that there's consensus on.
Oh, yeah, I have two speakers, sorry.
Speakers,
okay. We'll do our speakers first, Erica Leary, and then followed by Jim Regenbach.
Evening. Oh, there we go. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Erica Leary here again, Program Manager for the North Coastal Prevention Coalition, serving the communities of Carlsbad, Oceanside, and Vista to reduce the harm of alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, and other drugs through community action, education, support, and collaboration. I've been here many times before, happy to be back. Next year, we will be celebrating our 30th anniversary. And we have seen tremendous success. I don't know if you caught Aaron Bizak's op-ed in the Coast News this week, but we have 2/3 of high school juniors in our region reporting no use of substances in their lifetime. But that took collective action and commitment from all parties involved. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that when it comes to youth marijuana use. We're hearing from our school officials that THC vaping is now the most common problem they're finding on their campuses, a weekly occurrence at middle schools and a daily occurrence at high schools. Unfortunately, the wave proposed to allocate funds is unlikely to make any difference in that impact. A little bit. Again, we're very unfortunate. Frustrated that it's taken so long to implement decoy operations. That's not the city's fault, and if you're relying on the Department of Cannabis Control for direction, you're probably going to be waiting a long time. It's not their priority either. Their priority is to expand the market. We need decoy operations for both legal sales and illegal sales, and we need a priority on delivery operations. Nobody has done that in the state to our knowledge. I'd like to propose a bold reshifting of your allocations and set aside $1 million to commit to youth prevention activities. We have research that shows what works, and unfortunately, many of us continue to do strategies that don't work. We need to prioritize reducing youth access to marijuana. We need to prioritize family functioning, parental monitoring, counseling, communication. We need refusal skill curriculums in our schools, especially at the middle school level, and we need a comprehensive community messaging campaign. Vista could pay for the billboards on the 78 and have one next to the one that says Coastal Wellness, Recreational Cannabis, and Cake House, and have a message that helps inform youth, especially that cannabis should not be viewed recreationally for those under 21. It's too easy for them to get when they're under 21. And I know I'm going to run out of time, so just another comment, the safe parking, that's only 25 spaces. So you're going to allocate more money for 25 parking spaces than youth prevention and intervention. And if those are one-year RFPs, the funders are very likely going to be unable to implement a program that then they have to end in a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Regenbach.
Good evening. Last year, there was a vote to use cannabis money to add a deputy. Mr. Franklin used misleading data to present the Sheriff's Department as under-resourced. The Sheriff's Department didn't even ask for additional deputies. And after Mr. Franklin got the votes he needed, he went on Nextdoor and took a victory lap and called me and others, quote, anti-police extremists. I simply wanted a presentation from the department on why they needed an increased budget, and I wanted accurate data to back up sound reasoning. We got none of that. We have Mr. Franklin, who has been the majority leader of the council for 8 years, rubber stamping one department's increase in budget with no questions asked. I'm pretty sure any other city department who needs more resources would have to present some type of reasoning. Why is it that the Sheriff's Department gets an increase in their budget with zero justification? In fact, Mayor Ritter's justification at the time was that she looked out her window and saw them driving by a lot, so they must be busy. And apparently that is enough reason to add over $250,000 to their budget. Please make decisions based on data and best practice. As far as determining staffing levels for law enforcement, there are 5 models. 1, the crime trends model, 2, per capita model, 3, minimum manning levels, 4, authorized budget levels, and 5, workload-based model. A popular model, and the one that Mr. Franklin has based his campaign on, is the per capita approach. The International Association of Chiefs of Police do not recommend this method. It is inefficient and unreliable. It's easy to comprehend and apply, and thus easy to campaign on, but again, it's not best practice. The workload-based model is best practice. It relies on actual demand for police services and matches that with the supply of police resources, demand and supply. The great thing about this is we can focus on the demand side and lowering the demand by investing in the community, investing in our youth, investing in an infrastructure, and investing in homelessness solutions. This model requires a lot of data and a lot of data analysis, but we are fortunate to be serviced by the Sheriff's Department. It's a massive organization with massive amounts of data and data analysis on staff. Let's use those capabilities to make decisions. Let's make the work of our deputies safer by investing in the community. Thanks.
Thank you. That's all of our speakers, so we'll go to Councilmember Contreras.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for walking us through this. I am super ecstatic about the scholarship program and how we're redoing it to ensure that we're able to reach more of the community, including for our recreational purposes and what we offer. I have 2 things. So one, I want to look at the playground resurfacing. I noticed that Luz Duran Park is not on there. I understand that there are, reasons as to why the city decided to put wood chips there. However, I think it really looks poorly when a community with the most concern that has limited access to open space is the only one that has wood chips versus actual spongy surface. So, I really want to see, and I demand that we have equity in our playgrounds. Luz Duran Park, the playground isn't that big. It's not, bigger than Wildwood. It's relatively small. And I want to ensure that all Vistans have equal access to a park, that they're not going to get splinters and wood chips stuck in their socks when they're playing around. So I definitely want to see that be part of the resurfacing efforts that we undertake. And then I don't know if this ties into the social equity study, but I brought this forward. We have California Assembly Bill 3121, and it establishes the task force to study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans with special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. And I think that we should commit to figuring out how the city of Vista fits into Assembly Bill 3121. The war on drugs has been devastating, especially to African Americans, and anything that we can do to reappropriate cannabis revenues for those who have a legacy, a historical relationship with being enslaved. We need to take a look at that. There's already different jurisdictions that are moving forward with that, and I think that should be part of what we do here in the city of Vista as well. Those are my 2 comments. Outside of that, I totally, agree with what we're doing, and I really, I hear you, Erica. I wish that we could move forward. This is something that I really wanted to see, was us investing our excess cannabis revenues to do a decoy operation when it comes to cannabis. So, hopefully that's something that we can move along as fast as possible. But other than that, those are my only comments. Thank you.
Speaking of Luz Duran Park, when I was here, we did put spongy, what do you call it, the covering down there.
Rubberized surface.
Rubberized surface, thank you. I have a better description. Rubberized surface down there, and it was dug up on more than one occasion. And so that's the reason we went to wood chips, is because we couldn't afford to keep replacing. It's very expensive, and then once you do it, if they dig it up with knives and whatever they were doing it, then it's very expensive to replace it. So that's why it's not on the, so if you have a suggestion on how to protect that, okay, go.
I actually reviewed this with our city manager because, I've been talking about public safety in a holistic and comprehensive way. And in the future, I really want to see agendize a comprehensive plan to address crime in our city that isn't just adding a deputy, that's really looking at the environment. At Luz Duran Park, there's an opportunity to close the park at night. And I want us to be able to have equity in our park spaces. So I understand it's super expensive and the costs have gone up astronomically to put the rubberized surface. But for a community that has probably one of the greatest needs to access open space, and especially as we create more density, whether by the state mandates or something that we do here on council, it's important that our residents have access to playgrounds, especially we're such a young city. So there is an opportunity, and it's something that I want to work out with our city manager to close off the space at night, because a lot, in my conversations with Patrick, it seems like a lot of this activity is not brought upon by the daytime use, but it's kind of the loitering and stuff that happens at night. And, I have a lot of, obviously I represent District 1, so my constituents tell me all the nefarious things that happen at night. So being able to enhance that environment and deter some of this, the loitering and any other kind of nefarious activities, not only is that going to help us create a city with lower crime rates, but it's also going to protect a very important urban asset. So this is something that I think we can do. There's a real easy, small amount of space that can be closed off. It's not very big. That tot lot is pretty small, smaller than the basketball court. And maybe there's a way in my conversations with our city manager where we can close off the basketball court and the tot lot. I know that it's an issue after night, so being able to close that off, I just want to be able to have, kids play on a spongy surface. And I remember when I was little, obviously I don't play on the tot lot anymore, but at Beaumont, we had mulch and it was just like, it just constantly gets stuck everywhere. So I think it'd be nice to kind of have the same standard for all our parks, but also take additional steps to protect our assets as a city.
And we did have the same standard for that park. It was very important to us to do that, and so we tried it. I think we even had awnings that they sliced over there. So, but I would support it only if it was secured.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want it secured because I don't want our money to go to waste.
Right.
It's incredibly important that we are protective of our taxpayer dollars and we have an immediate return on investment that is ongoing. So I'm 100% with you that I believe that we do have a way to secure it.
Okay, but I would say if it happens again, if we fix it and it's really nice and it happens again, then maybe back to wood chip.
Mayor, let's do a test run.
If I could clarify what Councilmember Contreras and I spoke about was, it's exactly what she said, but using year-end fund balance to if the council's supportive, using year-end fund balance to resurface the park playground, and then using park development fees to put some, I'll call it decorative wrought iron, around the area to secure it at night. And when the park directors close up Luz Duran, they would also close up the space to protect the space.
You agreeable to that? Okay. Okay. Okay, so Councilmember Melendez.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am really excited that we are able to invest in different areas of the community. I just had a question about the safe parking allocation. I'm happy to see it's on here because it's one of my initiatives and I really want to make sure that it's successful. But why use funds from the excess cannabis revenues versus using it from our housing fund or any other, seemingly more appropriate fund?
So the available funds in housing, we've maxed out. And so that's why we're looking at using these funds.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to see that be supported. I'm also happy to know that the county granted us, $65,000. So yeah, I'm in support of this whole list. I don't have much else to share there. So thanks for all of your work.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, so I appreciate the members of the community that spoke about the supply and demand problem that we do have with our sheriff's department. I've been talking about it for 8 years now, campaigned on it 8 years ago. And as our sheriff's captain has reiterated in his last report to the city, we are the busiest sheriff's station in the entire county. We have a greater demand placed on our deputies than those that police other contract cities. We have added, as a council, in the 8 years I've been on the council, is my understanding that this goes for the last 15 years. This council has only added 2 deputies. I was able to negotiate to get a deputy paid for when we opened the CSU by the county, which was a great deal for the city because we get a deputy for free. So we've added 3. We had 2 knockdown, drag-out fights to get those 2 hired. When we hired 18 firefighters in the same period of time, we did them all on consent, didn't have to argue about it. We all knew that as we had added 20,000 new residents in the last 20 years, obviously we needed more teachers, we needed more firefighters, we need more parks, and of course we need more deputies to police our city. So I appreciate the community coming forth, make that supply and demand argument. You're absolutely right. I appreciate your point of view, which is why I want to say out of this $2.34 million, I clearly, there is room here for another $229,000 for an additional deputy, which would be only the 3rd deputy and only that the city council has hired in these last 8 years, and only the 2nd to be paid for with the marijuana money. Now, when the community approved cannabis, I think they were looking for ongoing benefits, and I think one of those benefits clearly was a belief that we would have an investment in law enforcement. And so I think as a council, we need to prioritize that. We have, obviously, in a month here, we have people who are running for council and mayor. The great thing is that all 4 of the candidates all agree, all on record have said that they support hiring more law enforcement, more deputy sheriffs. So even those, that once disagreed about that have come into agreement. Clearly, we're going to be electing a council this coming year that agrees on that. We have an opportunity ahead of us right now. And what is our balance right now in our park fund?
Who knows?
In our park development fund?
Yes.
I think the available balance is around, I want to say it's close to $8 to $9 million.
So we have $8 to $9 million. Some of these park projects you have here, aren't those capable of being spent out of that fund?
No, so what you see there, like the playground resurfacing, that is a maintenance issue, so it's not new playground. If it was a new playground, we could use the funds for that, but it's not eligible. Just looking down and park improvements, We're not adding new improvements, we're maintaining existing improvements like trails, netting, fencing, landscaping, and things that are already in existence, so they are not eligible.
Well, I'm going to ask the council to join me in asking staff to find, if we can afford $100,000 for our equity study and $700,000 for the playground resurfacing, we can increase our lighting from $145,000 to $500,000, which I support. I think we can find $229,000 in this budget, and I would really like to do that. So I'm asking the council to join me to ask staff. Obviously, we're going to hear this issue again. We don't have, I think probably, I'm guessing we're not going to have a majority agreement on this tonight without our full council here. So we're going to talk about this subject matter again. I'd like to discuss it again in a public meeting, not have it just confirmed. I want to get the community involved in this discussion. So I would ask Councilmember Melendez and Councilmember Contreras to join me in supporting an additional deputy with this fund. And Mayor, I would ask you to join me in supporting adding a deputy. It's, only adding 3 of them in 20 years. We just find ourselves way behind where we need to be. And part of my commitment to the community as a member of the council is that we catch up with where we need to be on policing resources. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Contreras.
I just want to make it clear, it's not like a one-time cost, it's an ongoing annual cost. And I believe for the first year, it's going to be higher than 229, or is it going to be, what's the cost? And I will also say that I know that our captain gave testimony and said that we have adequate traffic enforcement. However, I don't see that. So that's my comment on it. But yeah, so I want to know the figures. And again, these are ongoing costs versus playground resurfacing, which is a one-time cost. Park improvements is a one-time cost. Safe parking program, I guess we could say that's an ongoing cost, but we have a huge need. And lighting, pretty much a one-time cost. Social equity, pretty much a one-time cost. Postal way sign, one-time cost. Cannabis prevention, that's probably going to be ongoing, and it's exactly what we should be using our cannabis revenues for. Scholarship program, I hope that's ongoing, exactly what we should be using our cannabis revenue fund. But, right now we have a monopoly on cannabis, essentially, here in North County. It might not always be like that. So we need to also consider how to be fiscally responsible with our money, because this is not just our money, it's everybody's money. So, I think I want to know a little bit more about the costs, and I think that we definitely have to have a full council. But at this time, I am not supportive. Thank you.
And Mayor, to answer the question, when you bring a deputy on for the first year, it's approximately $275,000. You have to buy the gear, the vehicle, everything else that goes with it. And then in year 2, it drops down to somewhere around the $230,000 mark.
Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you. Just to clarify, we're providing direction tonight, or are we voting for this list as a whole?
We're trying to get consensus tonight. We will bring the item back as a budget adjustment item, but if we could get as close so that we are adopting that item, that would be great.
Okay.
And if I might add, like last year, we may find consensus on a number of items, and if we can't get consensus on 1 or 2 items, then we will do further research and work with the council.
Okay, awesome. So my understanding is that we do have consensus on the items that are here. At this time, I wouldn't be supportive of using the excess cannabis tax revenues to hire an additional sheriff deputy. I think because of all of our ongoing conversations, why don't we have a comprehensive crime management plan that we can utilize to set goals? And one of my goals is reducing calls to service in general. So, I could advocate for further initiatives here to reduce calls to service. One of my passions is domestic violence and issues surrounding family crisis, and there are a whole sector of calls to service related to those issues. So it's difficult when we want to apply these funds without having a strategy in place. I would potentially be supportive of that if through a discussion and a comprehensive crime management plan that was revealed as a top strategy and we were able to use this funding or another source of funding for that. But I really want to be more strategic. For example, the safe parking program had been part of ongoing discussions, and now it's on this list. I do have, my previous question alluded to the use of excess cannabis revenues for safe parking versus ongoing housing funds, right? So it's not a perfect list by any means. We're always, it's part of our American project. We're always seeking to improve. But in order to agree with something like that, I would want to have more of a comprehensive plan and be able to input some of my goals as well. Like I said, reducing calls to service and taking care of some of the domestic violence crisis that we're seeing in our community. So I would not be supportive of that at this time.
I would just say that the response for calls, I see people, complaining the people aren't responding to calls as quickly as they would like to have them for the sheriff. And I also think, I see people running red lights all the time. We need another motor deputy. I mean, it's scary, all the people running red lights. Everybody stop before you take off at a red light, look and make sure those cars stop on the other side, because people are running those lights all the time. I see it. So I think we could use another deputy, but you can bring it back. I think bring it back and talk about it. I would say, I would support that. So, Councilmember Melendez, you already talked. So, I guess it's and Councilmember. Are you okay? Councilmember Contreras.
I think that we definitely need to have a holistic approach to public safety. I mean, it's all the things that we talk about. It includes, pedestrians being able to walk safely and cyclists being able to cycle safely in areas where it makes sense for us to have, some kind of barrier or buffer for a bike lane. So, having a holistic approach to enhancing community well-being and safety, it's critical for our city to really come up with a comprehensive plan to address crime and public safety. So, if we're able to do that this year, bring a discussion forward, I think the sooner we can do it, the better. I've been asking for kind of a long time at this point, and I haven't seen it come forward. So I do want to have that thorough discussion, because, we can't be a one-trick pony here saying that, this one strategy is going to help us. We really need to have a comprehensive approach. I totally agree with you, Mayor Ritter. Like, it is a huge concern, the traffic violations and the lawlessness that's happening in our streets with vehicles. That's where I feel like if we had a study, we can take a look and say, hey, you know what, we do need another deputy on a motorcycle that can start writing tickets out. I mean, it's scary. As someone who uses a lot of public transit and I got to walk to it, it can be a little dicey. That's why I haven't made the jump to my e-bike yet, but I want to get there. I know. So, hopefully we can have a more thorough discussion about how we want to reduce crime in our city. And, lighting is a huge part of it. Being able to, address some of the issues. I have a lot of constituents where they've had to, they're actually a little bit disappointed because they call for help. They have a car that's stolen and it's just a low priority, and they're told, hey, it's a low priority, yet that's what's increasing our crime rate, right? So in order to make it a higher priority, is it just one deputy that we need, or do we need 20? We can't afford 20.
Hope we don't need 20.
Right, we can't afford 20. So before we're just like, hey, we got to add another one, right? What kind of deputy do we need? What are some of the more urgent needs in our community? What are some social services that can be parallel to our law enforcement to address domestic violence? We saw, at the captain's report, I believe it's 38% of assaults are domestic violence. I remember when I talked to Captain Rylerzam so many captains ago, and he said, if we could reduce our domestic violence, our crime rate would drop significantly. So we really have to be a lot more strategic about how we're going to deploy public money. It's such a big responsibility that we have, and I know we all really want a safer Vista. And there's so many different approaches to it that I think the best practice is to really have a comprehensive strategy to address these different sectors of crime and reduce the opportunity that the environment provides for crime. Again, when the sheriffs had a really good community forum, I know Deputy Mayor was there, I was there, right here at Morris Vance, the community room, it was stated the safest place to park your car is where there's lights. So, we're addressing some of the lighting issues. I know it's going to take forever because we got to do this study. But being able to have this type of comprehensive, holistic approach, it's going to benefit us immediately and for generations to come. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you. I love the idea of having a comprehensive approach to crime, and I appreciate you making the suggestion. I will join you in asking the city manager to bring that discussion back to us. We should absolutely have a holistic approach. I agree with your concern about domestic violence. If we can reduce that, we're serving our community as well as reducing cost of making the community safer. It's great. One of the things that concerns me is I know that we will not hesitate to spend $500,000 on a study where we could have, the annual go-forward cost of 2 deputies for that $500,000, or 2 years of 1 deputy for $500,000. So, I'm a little concerned, that we're going to bring in, people that are going to wax eloquent about their theories. But I'd like to really ask our sheriff's captain to do what he could do as a leader to really analyze the workload statistics. I've been asking for some time to get some statistics about calls for service, reports that are being written. Some of the deputies have given me some better questions to ask, and I'd like to ask some of those questions and get them answered so that we really understand what the time demand is and workload for our deputies versus other cities and other cities with police departments. I'm all about getting some more metrics and some more data on that. I think that's important. But I would just, again, point out that we all knew we needed 18 more firefighters, and we've been able to celebrate it. We bring them, no controversy whatsoever when we hire new firefighters. No controversy when we hire new teachers. Obviously, we recognize policing as a priority because we spend 1/3 of our budget on it. But for some reason, it's just an absolute knockdown, drag-out fight when we want to add new deputies, even though we haven't done it except twice as a council in these last probably 15 years. So, we're beginning to first captain that we've had, in my 8 years, who actually said, yeah, maybe we could use some more resources, and I appreciate that. Because we've heard, I'll never forget when Captain Nesbitt said to me, it was my first month as a councilman, and he said, Vista is where all the young deputies come to get some action because they know there's a lot of crime up here, and they know they're going to be busy all day long, and they're not going to have time to take a break. And I thought, man, that was not what I was hoping to hear. Was the reputation of the city that I call home. I want a city that people feel safe in, and I'd like, I know it's not the reality, but I'm sorry, I grew up watching Andy Griffith, and I wish we were a small, sleepy town without the crime. But we have a lot of crime here. And, there's mixed feelings about reports that crime is on the wane. That's what, Sandag tells us, and the official numbers that are reported from the Sheriff's Department tell us crime's on the way down. But I know full well that the people of Vista don't feel like crime's on the way down. They very much feel like it's on the way up. And so, I think we have to be responsive and address that. So I appreciate the support for the concept.
Well, that completes our discussion items, and so that takes us to our oral communications, and we have one speaker, Jim Briggenbach. Are you announcing this? Do you have that on your list?
Good evening. We are in the midst of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I've heard multiple presentations from the sheriff's captains at council meetings and Community Safety Commission meetings. Each one highlights Vista's problem with domestic violence. This is an issue that should get some focus. But again, we have a majority voice on the council that wants to keep increasing the sheriff's department budget and not focus on real solutions. If the focus is on deputies, we should definitely invest in reducing domestic violence. Domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls a deputy goes on. But there's other investing we could do. Investing in affordable housing would help. 83% of domestic violence survivors entering shelters identified, quote, finding housing I can afford as a need. A couple other points from various studies. Survivors of domestic violence face many barriers to safety. A few are: 1, poor credit and ruined rental histories; 2, lack of steady employment; 3, housing discrimination; and 4, loss of subsidized or other affordable housing. Another one, the need for safe housing and the economic resources to maintain safe housing are two of the most pressing concerns among abused women who are planning to or have recently left an abuser. There are also programs to address the abuser, something called batterer intervention programming. Investing in any of this stuff would help. Nothing I found in my research indicated that adding deputies would help. In fact, it's never suggested. In fact, I think it hurts our deputies because you're sending them into very volatile situations. And like the professional political strategist that he is, Mr. Franklin took my comments earlier, ignored most of it, and used it for a chance to spout his political positions. Yes, the sheriff's captain technically agreed that he could use more, but you had to question him like he was a hostile witness in court. And when Councilmember Green asked him more directly to clarify, he did not clarify. And that's not a knock on the captain. He knows your approach to staffing is not right. Staffing models for teachers in schools and nurses in hospitals are wildly different. No professional would equate them. Another point about traffic enforcement. We had red light cameras. You voted to get rid of them. The staff presented information that they were helping. And so are you interested in community safety or not? It's very confusing. Thank you.
Thank you. That's our only speaker tonight. So I will do my announcements, and then I'll work my way down that way. So a couple things. This year's North County Veterans Stand Down is being held October 20th through the 23rd at Green Oaks Ranch. The free event provides veterans information and services that address homelessness and other issues facing veterans in a safe, secure, and friendly environment. And more information is online at ncstanddown.org, so you can get more information about that there. The San Diego Reader Best of San Diego issue has been published, and The Moonlight came in 3rd place in their Best Theater Company category. The Moonlight came in behind two of the largest professional San Diego theaters, the Old Globe Theater and the La Jolla Playhouse, and this demonstrates that the quality of the Moonlight musicals is considered by the voters to be on the same par with organizations that have larger budgets and resources. So we're very proud of the Moonlight. And then one other thing, that on Thursday, October 27th, is the Trick or Treat Halloween here at the city parking lot. So it's kid-friendly craft kits, goodies, fire engines, squad cars, and display or more. So it's information is cityofvista.com/trick-or-treat. You can get some information on that. It's at our parking lot on October 27th from 4 to 6. And so with that, I will go to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have anything else tonight.
How about Councilmember Contreras?
Yes, I finally got to meet Jimmy, the new executive director of Operation Hope, and I haven't been able to shake the statistic. And, it's something that when we've talked about our strategic plan to address crime, that I've pointed out that we don't look at anybody 18 and under. But he said that 62% of the participants are youth. So that is an incredible amount of youth that don't have stability. So anyways, I just thought I would share that because it's quite shocking. Other than that, tomorrow is Wednesday, so there's always a trash pickup, even if I can't be there. Team Captain Jovita Serafin and the Guerreras continue the legacy on a weekly basis. And if you want to connect with them, you can actually find them online as well, but you can always reach out to me and I can connect you. It's at 8 a.m., more like 8:30 at Luz Duran Park. And let me see if there's anything else. I did represent North County Transit District at the Sandag Transportation Committee and the Transnet transit operation funds from Transnet's like way oversubscribed, but there's already a commitment to increase the frequency of the coaster. So MTS and NCTD are really concerned about that. So it was advocating for continuing the frequency of the coaster. We've seen year over year, 154% increase in ridership. So it's going in the right direction. Unfortunately, we have critical failures happening on our low sand corridor. So Sandag has some plans. They got $300 million to look at realigning, but OCTA is kind of fallen behind. So anybody that has any connections to Orange County, please tell them they need to have a plan and funding too, because right now you can't even take the train up there. They're still allowing freight, but it's at 10 miles per hour and it has to be like watched by someone. And it's a strategic corridor. Actually, the Department of Defense, I believe it was last year, they designated it as part of StracNet. So it's extremely important. So hopefully OCTA kind of gets it together because that's an incredibly important economic corridor, and it gets freight down to Camp Pendleton and our different bases here. We are a military town, so we need to have access to that line. The whole thing needs to get realigned, though, because it's like literally falling into the ocean. And with that, Joe's not here, so I'm just going to have to say, get your tacos, Taco Tuesday, and have a good night. Thank you.
Councilmember Melendez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you to the folks that came to speak earlier with the San Diego Organizing Project. They're local members of the St. Francis Church here in District 3, and they've been very passionate about inclusionary housing, so I'm glad that we could do our due diligence and have a very productive conversation with them tonight. I met with them this last Friday and let them know, hey, these are the updates, and I'm just not okay with triggering a density bonus for every single project. And although we all agreed we wanted to advocate for the most inclusivity and the most affordability as possible, we really are just happy to continue to incrementally progress in our city. And I love being up here, and I love having fun, fiery conversations with everyone. And if anybody needs anything from me, you know where to find me. I just want to put my phone number out there. It's 760-277-2922. You can call me or text me, and I've just been having a really great time. So I hope everybody has a really, really good night. Get some good food, some good tacos, and some good rest. Good night.
City Manager Patrick Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one item tonight, and that is Palo Vista Park construction. And the driveway construction is underway. It's nice to see that the site is actually progressing in terms of construction and the grading there, so that's good news. The driveway is being poured this week, and hopefully it'll be done by early next week, and hopefully the rain won't slow it up.
Right.
But it's just great to see that. And then also SDG&E will be removing poles tomorrow night. So a lot of activity there, but overall good to see progress at that park again. So thank you.
City Attorney Walter. Nothing? How about City Clerk Kathy? Claire, nothing? Okay, with that, it is 8:11. We are adjourned.